starting off, since the sentencing, you kind of were able to be a free man for a little bit until you had to be locked away. How have these last couple of weeks been for you?
They've definitely been stressful because, my first priority was taking care of the family, making sure there's, that there's money in the bank, that the shop's restocked, anything I can do to take the weight off of Sophie while I'm gone, while she adjusts, spending time with my kids. That was number one focus. And then the second focus was I could finally talk. I could actually say something about all this because I've spent 3.5 years watching the media say one thing and the DA say something else, and I couldn't speak at all. So I've definitely taken to the internet and done what I can. And that's been my life, like, since the day of sentencing, is just trying to balance work, family, and getting my story out there.
And what does family at home look like for you?
Well, there's me and Sophie, and then she has a 9-year-old son, and I have a 15-year-old daughter. Great kids, I love my kids so much. At home, it's pretty normal, despite what most people would think. Like, we leave work at the end of the day, we go home, one of us makes dinner. I help the youngest with homework. Sometimes we take an hour nap, and I get up and then I work throughout the night creating stock, and things for the shop.
What do they think? What do your kids kind of think about all of this?
My daughter, she didn't believe it would ever get as far as it did. She went through a lot with all the news articles dropping and everything like that. She went to live with her mom. I wanted to keep her protected and away from this as much as possible. She didn't really break down about anything until New Year's Eve, actually. She bawled on me. She was just like, I don't want them to take my dad away. She's like, you've been here my whole life. She's like, they keep saying you're a monster, you're not a monster, and then she ran into the room to Sophie and just cried on her. And, she was like, I love you, you treat us so good, so that's been rough. I'm actually going to be seeing her for the last time this weekend. And our son, he's 9, he's special needs, he's on the spectrum. Hasn't talked about it much, but the emotional irregularity he deals with, it's coming out. He's a lot more temperamental. Just within the last 2 days, he's kind of started voicing, life isn't going to be the same without you, Jeremy, and things like that. And I just tell him, I'm like, you can write to me, you can talk to me on the phone when I call mom, and when you're a little older and mom thinks you're ready, you can come visit me, because again, his irregularities with his emotion and his hyperactivity and stuff, it's not somewhere I think he'd do well, but he's made leaps and bounds of progress. So I'm hoping in time, if I'm still there, he can come visit too.
Yeah, I can tell how proud you are, even just when you talk about him. Your eyes definitely light up.
No, it's been amazing. Like, being a dad was my favorite thing in the world, and like, I only had one child. I had helped raise my nephews before I had a daughter, so coming into Sophie's son's life and helping him grow and watching that progress, I'm a very proud papa in that way.
What was kind of the decision to remain silent, and why are you speaking out now?
The decision to stay silent was pretty much survival, because anything I said publicly could have been used or twisted in the case. It could have hurt my case. It wasn't a risk I could take, and as we've seen, I did everything right. I won 99% of my motions, and I still got slapped with a ridiculous sentence. So that's why I had to do it. I had to be very careful. Now it's over, so I can say whatever I want. I can show whatever I want. I can explain everything. So that's the nice part.
Talk to me a little bit about, number one, the decision to enter a guilty plea, and then number two, your involvement in all of this.
So the guilty plea, this is complicated in the sense that, this all began because of my ex-wife. I was removed from my house. She had wiped out my bank accounts, all this. As if that's not, enough to spiral somebody. Within a month of that, this all kicked off. All due to her calling, that's a whole other story there. And, when you're dealing with all that and it's just piling up, like, you want it to be over. Like, you're exhausted. You're mentally exhausted, emotionally exhausted, financially. I can't even tell you what it costs to fight a case like this. And then by the time, as quickly as the media picked it up, and I was my face was on every news possible channel from here to Australia, I didn't think I'd get a fair trial. Like, I really didn't think I'd have a fair shake at anything. And there was a time where I thought about it, because when the guilty plea was offered to me, it was, you have to say they were stolen. that you knew theft was happening. And I was like, but I didn't. And I was like, I don't like that. I'm not going to agree to that. And I was told it was my constitutional right to go to trial, but it was their right to add more charges if I did. Things like wire fraud, money laundering. Now, would these charges have stuck? Most likely not. But in the system, if you have 6 charges and you go to trial, you may be found not guilty on 4 of them, but you're still going to have those 2 original charges they were trying to stick you with. And then because you went to trial, they're going to ask for the maximum. So that was a huge factor. And finally, I just conceded and I buckled and I gave them what they wanted.
Talk to me a little bit about the decision not to do a jury trial.
Again, like, I really didn't think I was going to have a fair shake. I mean, it's not just my appearance. It was just how I was presented with my appearance the entire time. And no matter what, I don't believe juries are fully unbiased. I mean, everyone is human. Everyone has an opinion. Do some people go in there and can they set that bias aside, that opinion aside? 100%. Can 12 people do it? Maybe. And that was a big risk, because maximum was 15 years, which they ended up trying to give me anyway, even though I cooperated and just took the guilty plea. In the long run, I should have just done it. But at the time, I was just trying to put my life back together after what was going on, not considering this case, And I just, in order to do that, I had to end this. I had to get it over with. So when I pled guilty, I was like, well, that's the first step. Whatever you're going to give me, let me just go do the time, get it over with. I don't even care about explaining my innocence. I just want this done. And then it went on for another 2 years, and that just became my entire existence. Everything about my life was just kind of paused. I could do certain things, like Sophie and I opened a shop, but the amount of opportunities and things I just had to turn down because I'm like, I might not be here next month. I never knew when sentencing was coming. I didn't know how long from the time I got the date to the actual sentencing. And I just kind of kept riding the wave.
Opening this shop, what was the initial reaction when you guys opened here?
50-50. A lot of people that support us, friends and family, were like, good for you. Don't let the man hold you down. That kind of opinion. One news anchor just showed up at my house, and I was like, I can't talk to you about anything. And she was like, well, can you tell me why you're opening a shop? I'm like, because I'm a businessman. I'm an entrepreneur. It's what I do. But why now? I'm like, well, are you going to pay my bills? You know what I mean? Like, I was like, this is what I'm good at. This is what I'm passionate about. And I was like, it has nothing to do with the case, and then, yeah, so there was definitely some pushback there. When it came to the actual area I'm in, there was one guy who went on like a 5-minute, it was very short-lived, but a 5-minute campaign to not let me here. And luckily there was another woman who held some weight in the area, and she kind of did her own research. She didn't watch the media articles. And she did her own research, and she actually reached out to me, and she was just like, now that I've done my own research and actually looked into it myself, she's like, I support what you're doing. And she kind of like shut him down and just kind of faded. And in over a year and a half of being here, we haven't had a single issue. Just somebody that, because of the news and everything, she just learned about it and started deep diving on her own, actually looking at court documents, and it was helpful. And she just not long ago, maybe early November, she actually stopped in for the first time because she ended up moving away shortly after we opened, and she just moved back, and she came in and visited, and we met in person, and it was pretty cool. So
talking a little bit about the media, what do you think was different from the media portrayal versus what actually happened in the case? Everything. Like, the media portrayal was very based on my appearance, which is shocking to the average person. I get it. The media also focused on not so much my involvement, just as in what I did in this whole line of people, but just my involvement at all. Headlines, sicko body snatcher, things like that, Even when an article wasn't about me and it was about one of the co-defendants, it was my face plastered. What actually happened, and again, to the average person, me being like, oh, I accidentally bought a stolen body part, that sounds really weird to people. But when you're in this business, it's not uncommon to buy ex-medical specimens, old medical human bones, skulls. I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of these items just in our country. I understand the outcry because people that aren't in the business don't quite know it's a thing. It all started with a woman who reached out to me. She worked at a facility. She's like, we dispose of these old cadaver parts. not uncommon. But she's like, yeah, when the cadavers are just used beyond any use a college or school can use them, we incinerate them and we just spread the ashes outside. That's how she said it. That's more common than people realize. The body broker industry and the funeral industry, there is a lot people would be upset about. And so I'm like, yeah, what do you have? And again, this wasn't weird. I've been doing this over a decade. And that's how it all kicked off.
Yeah, she just messaged you because you're known in the industry?
Yeah, she just reached out and was like, I love your work. She had been following my museum page, things like that. And I was working on what's known as a room temperature form of plastination, which is a chemical process where you can take a biological item and instead of keeping it in a jar with liquid, you can remove all the lipids and fat from it and replace it with polymers, which allows you to hold the specimen. It won't rot, it won't stink, it's not toxic. And it's usually done with a big freezer. I was trying to create a room temperature version of this, and I succeeded. And my goal there was to perfect that and then speak to universities and colleges that had old wet specimens in their storage and stuff like that, and plastinate them so they could go back into the educational field. Very few items I bought from her I actually sold, which is like why there was so much in the house. Like, I wasn't turning a massive profit off this. This was all part of my nonprofit and what I was trying to accomplish. That spun into the Harvard thing, which I got more notoriously known for than anything else, which was wild. Because through the investigation and my ex-wife giving information to the federal, the FBI, it turned out that two people that I had bought specimens from at some point, one of them we had one transaction, they in turn had bought from the morgue manager at Harvard. And when anyone's like, how can he have known? I want people to use common sense. If you are doing an illegal activity and you know it's illegal, and then you're going to sell that product, are you going to tell the guy you sell it to that it was illegal and that where your source was? No one's going to do that. So like, of course I didn't know, And the other, out of those two people, the other person, we had, tens of thousands of dollars in transactions, but he's an antique dealer. It's the stuff I buy. So like almost all of our transactions, honestly, were old medical equipment, some bones and stuff, that were medical based. So even then it was just, I couldn't fathom how I got so looped in to the Harvard thing. It just didn't make sense to me.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the legal process of getting the bones? I know we have a femur over here, we've got a skeleton over here. How are these legal to sell versus some other bones?
So many people are extremely shocked to learn that there are less laws regarding human remains than there are birds. There is sometimes I'll have somebody that wants something and they'll be like, does it have paperwork? I need paperwork. I'm like, there's no such paperwork. Paperwork doesn't exist. You might have a receipt from 1967 or something, when it was originally sold to a doctor, but there is no permit for it. There's no legal paperwork. Most of the bones, especially, come from old osteology supply houses. Up until the mid 80s, whole human skeletons were sent to America from China, India. They were stripped down, they were articulated, they were used in schools. It was a very common practice until the mid 20th century that as a medical student, you had at least half a skeleton. You rented it like you get your books, and like that was used to study.
And where would they rent it from? The school, or would there be like
the school usually would work with companies like Adam Ruili, Clay Adams. These are big name companies that you can research that's what they did. And then as time went on, these companies started, either they went under or they started making medical models. Things started switching over to composite. But these bones were still out there. So certain companies and certain people will buy up this surplus and either keep them or like resell them into the open market. And that's where the majority comes from.
And who would you say are your biggest customers that come in here and maybe buy a skull or a skeleton or a bone or whatever?
As far as do I have customers like that?
Yeah, if someone came in off the street, and was looking for a bone, is it just your average Joe or is it a collector?
Usually. The funny thing is, it's not, and I've said this for years, it's not the people you think it would be. It's your bank teller. It's your kid's teacher. It's the Cub Scout leader. It's not the weird goth kid. It's not the, you know what I mean? It's not the people you would think.
there's a wonderful gentleman named Brad who stops in from time to time, and he's I'd say mid to late 50s, very normal looking guy, super intelligent. And every time he comes in, he buys something, and every time he comes in, if there's a human skull available, he snags it. He wants it. He loves it. The last time he was in here, he bought both. I had 2 on the floor, just came in, and he was like, would you do a deal on both? And I was just like, I can work with you, So yeah, it's definitely not the stereotypical sicko, you know what I mean? Like that's not a thing. That's not a thing at all.
And I know that you and Sophie both sell things still on Facebook. Talk to me a little bit about, is there like a market on Facebook for human bones? Is it just you guys?
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's tons of oddity groups on Facebook. Facebook itself has regulation that you can't sell anything human, or mostly animal stuff for that matter, but everyone works around it anyway. Yeah, but there's a huge market for that. Like I said, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of oddity groups online.
So talk to me, we kind of talked a little bit before about your appearance, but what was the decision that kind of made you want to look the way that you do?
Even as a kid, it all started with tattooing. Even as a kid, my grandfather had, old Navy tattoos on him, and I probably was like 5 or 6, and I just remember being infatuated by that. And then I moved out at 17, and this back in those days, nobody carded you. You sat there and smoked a cigarette while you got tattooed. It was a whole different thing than it is now. Got my first tattoo at 17, and I just kept going. And then in the beginning, I was very cautious about keeping things, below the collar, above the cuff, until I decided that I was never going to work a normal job. I just decided, I was like, whatever I'm going to do, it's not going to be this. I was like, I'm just going to go out and carve my own path. And then I went to the face, and I never regretted it, because I fully believe that if you want to be who you are, you're going to work twice as hard. There's always a give or a take there, So, yeah, and then from there, I just kept wanting to do something different. Like I wanted to push the envelope. I don't really have a reason for why I wanted to push the envelope. I just felt like normal was boring, And then obviously, the half face thing is, it was meant to symbolize the duality of man. I wanted to look in the mirror every day and have a reminder that we all have 2 sides to ourselves, whether that's good and evil, or just how you are at home with your family versus how you are at work. That's a reality. Everyone has 2 sides, no matter how light or dark it is. And that's where all that came from. And after my face was done, having my eye tattooed just completed that entire transition.
How much of your body would you say is tattooed, like percentage-wise?
Maybe 65%,
Okay.
70%.
Wow. Yeah, and how much do you think it would have cost to get all of that done?
If I had to guess, it's been so many years, but with everything I have done, I'd say probably $100,000 of work on me.
What's it like, walking into the grocery store to go buy eggs for breakfast?
I get asked that a lot, actually. And the funny thing is, I forget what I look like. I don't think about it. You know what I mean? So I just go do my business. And I don't even think about it until that one time that one person will just stare. And I'll be like, oh yeah, that's why he's looking at me. But other than that, I've went to parent-teacher conferences my daughter's whole life. I went to science fairs, and I've never really come in, before this media sensation that happened with this case, I've never really felt I've experienced any negativity because of my appearance.
Do you think people are surprised when they meet you to find out that you're not, what did we say, grunts and clicks?
Yeah. I'm flattered, but it's also a backhanded compliment, because sometimes people will come up to me and they're worried to talk to me, and they get talking to me, and I'm a really personable person. I'm very friendly. And by the end of it, they're like, "You're so nice," or "You're so well spoken," and I'm just like, well, "What did you think? Did you think I couldn't speak? That I communicate in grunts and clicks?" You know what I mean? So it's sweet of them, but at the same time, I'm like, wow, how were you perceiving me before you decided to have the courage to just ask me a question?
Obviously, you're talking very positively about your body modifications and your tattoos, but now that all this is out, do you have any regrets about the way that you look?
No, I have no regrets, because at the end of the day, for me to say I regret how I look because of the fact that my looks created more of this, that's why I did it. I'm going to stand here and I'm going to stand by my looks, and because why would I let the media sensationalism make me want to regret who I am and who I wanted to be? You know what I mean? Like, so I'll stand by it.
And that sensationalism, is that why you're appealing your sentencing?
100%, because with the sentencing disparity that happened, I mean, there were people that knew what they were doing. They were far more culpable than me, and even their crimes were, I mean, it was bad. And you know, they're getting a slap on the wrist. And I fully believe that the sensationalism of the media, the outcry from the public, because my face was on every single person's articles, you have to make an example. I don't think I'm being punished directly for my appearance. I think I'm being punished because my appearance put me at the forefront.
For your involvement of all this, you know, if you had to sentence yourself, you know, as if it wasn't yourself, what sentencing do you think would be fair?
Legally speaking, my guideline range was 0 to 6 months. And it wasn't a human remains case. That's something else people don't understand. It was a stolen property case. So if I had bought a TV and didn't know it was stolen, do I deserve 6 years? You know, it's the human remains factor that is emotionally charged. And why I can understand that and I agree with that, that is not the legal system. Those feelings are not law. And that's where I think, you know, there's definitely been some contention. So, and that's why I'm going to appeal.
And what's that appeal process look like?
Well, so first you have to file a notice of appeal within 14 days of sentencing, which we did. And then it is basically my attorney will make a whole brief looking at reasons for an appeal. In this case, abuse of judge's discretion, because, you know, my guidelines were 0 to 6 months. He has the discretion to give me whatever, but he went so far one way that's one of the arguments. And then that's backed up by the sentencing disparity. You know, someone who was smuggling dead babies out of their job at a hospital got 18 months. You know, that doesn't make sense to me. You know, the guy who that gentleman was selling those corpses to, who was also buying from the morgue manager's wife, and it was a lot of human remains, he got 6 months. And all our guideline ranges were 0 to 6 months based on, you know, criminal history and factors in the case. At the end of the day, all of our starting points should be 0 to 6 months. So other than Cedric, you know, the morgue manager, who got 8 years, and, you know, keep in mind again, this is the morgue manager, this is the guy, this is the top dude, he gets 8 years and I get 6. It just doesn't track. So the sentencing disparity there is going to be a huge argument.
A lot of media outlets, but they're also saying you're a central part of this whole scandal. You know, do you agree with that?
Not at all. Not at all. And like, anyone that has fingers and eyes can go onto a computer and go to to pacer.com and look at the case. To say I'm an integral part of this scandal makes 0 sense because the facts are right there. You know, that's one of the things that I've never been super angry about, because I'm like, if you're really going to make accusations at me without doing your research, then you have bigger problems. You know what I mean? I'm not the issue here, you are, you know. So it bothers me that the media portrayed that, but it doesn't bother me as much as you think it would.
That makes sense. So obviously, you know, people say justice is blind. You know, we picture justice as Lady Justice with a blindfold on. Do you feel like in this case justice was blind?
No, justice definitely wasn't blind. You know, not at all. They had the bifocals on when they wanted to talk to me. So, and again, that's part of the appeal process, because this just it wasn't fair. And I'll admit, I feel bad for the families. It was never my intention knowingly to ever hurt anyone. And what happened was wrong regardless, no matter what. Whether I knew or didn't, I would take the responsibility for it. But I think me taking that responsibility did not warrant me to get 72 months.
We've got just a week until that 72 months starts. You know, what do these next 7 days look like for you?
Work. That's what I do. I want to make sure my family's okay. I've already been diving into research on programs and things to do in prison to lower my sentence, to get me out on home confinement faster, things like that. And just work and research.
And what have your friends and family, obviously, you know, seeing the Facebook comments online, what has everyone been kind of saying to you in these past few days?
Lots of support. An amazing amount of support, actually. People are trying to put money on my books. They're asking if there's a GoFundMe. I just addressed last night. I was like, financially, I'm fine. I appreciate it. If somebody chooses to write me and they throw $20 on my books, of course, thank you. But I'm okay. I've been letting everyone know, like, I'm okay. I appreciate the support. The support in itself is more than enough.
Now, on the other side of the spectrum, you do have all of these Facebook comments on a lot of the media pages, agreeing that you're a sicko or calling you these things. What goes through your head when you're looking at those negative comments?
I don't get upset about it because the majority of those people are ignorant. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Like, they're ignorant because they don't know the actual case facts. They're ignorant because they don't even know this world exists. To them, this is just very strange, so they have a knee-jerk reaction to it. Do I think I could sit down with every single one of them and change their view on it? No. Do I think I could change some of their views on it, or at least a portion of them? Absolutely. But the ignorance is what stops that from happening.
Talk to me actually a little bit about this world. What do you wish more people knew about the oddities world that maybe they don't know now?
I wish more people understood that, like, this is not creepy. It's most collectors, not all, and many shops thrive on education, ethical sourcing, family events even, it's just another hobby at the end of the day. And, you go to a tattoo convention or you go to a baseball card, flea market, it's the same thing. And, that bear skull might not be for you, but you know what? Buying Babe Ruth baseball cards ain't for me. You know what I mean? So, like, it can be that simple if people can just, pause the judgment and take a second to think about it. It's not hurting anybody. Unfortunately, like in this case, yes, there's bad eggs, people get hurt, but tell me that doesn't happen in any industry, But the majority of people in this community, they're good people. Like, they're genuinely sweet people, good people, ethical people. And I wish more people would pull the curtain back and kind of step in and just realize that, And I think that would go a long way.
So is this shop open for, like you were saying, the school teachers, the bank tellers?
Yeah. I mean, the shop, we get more clients in here that if you saw them on the street, you'd never guess. You would never think for a second they'd step foot in here. 100%. It's and people don't believe it. They assume, like, our clientels have to be goth or death metal band members, and it's like, we get those too, but far less than the average Joe.
What does life look like after prison?
It'll just be like I hit pause and hit play again.
Coming right back to the shop?
Yep. I'm going to be doing everything I've already was doing, and I'm just going to expand on everything that I'm doing that I couldn't expand on while I waited for this to be done.
Has anything changed for you in the way that you source your materials for the shop since this whole scandal came out?
I always felt I was careful vetting people. I've definitely got far more stringent, methods now. So, like, which I thought I had before, but again, it happens everywhere in any industry, But yeah, so and I boned up on new laws over the last few years, especially what states can have stuff travel across state lines and everything, just to make sure I'm on top of everything. There's not even a possible hiccup.
Now, is there anything that we didn't talk about in this that, you think is important to add for your side of the story?
I can't think of anything that we could fit in this interview, because anything else would be an hour, 2 hours.
Yeah, that's true. I do want to ask something, and if you don't want to answer it, you don't have to. But if you were able to say something to the families of those Harvard victims, what would you say?
That's complicated, because if I was able to say something, I would have said it. I'm not allowed to say anything, so I can't even speculate.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was part of the court order, which is very...
I figured there was something like that, but I wanted to ask it anyway just to have it out there.
It's very common, but I have to really toe that line. As much as I would like to, I can't.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Then if that's it, I think that we're all done. I think
cool.
That's all the questions that I have.
Sweet.